Would it be possible to sell your house without telling your other half? Well, that's what one woman did. She didn't tell her partner the house sale had gone through. She had other ideas for how to spend the money, and they weren't exactly great ones. In today's video, we're covering the story of Michelle Singlehurst and how, incredibly, she managed to gamble her house away without her partner finding out for 5 months, resulting in a traumatic 3-week stay in the hospital and the threat of homelessness. Stick around until the end. You're going to want to know how far she took it and how an overdose actually ended up saving her life. Weird, right? We'll explain later in the video. At the beginning of 2014, Michelle Singlehurst was living a pretty ordinary life with her partner Chris and 9-year-old daughter in their modest, detached family home in Surrey, where she was working as, ironically, a financial advisor. Ordinary life, sure, at least for a while. She had recently been through a particularly stressful time due to her elderly mother suffering neglect in the care home where she was a resident, nearly dying from dehydration. Luckily, she recovered, but the whole experience was pretty traumatic for everyone involved. In 2015, Singlehurst pulled her mother out of the care home, but the family needed more space, so they rented a larger house while renting out their own home. Singlehurst took on the role of her mother's full-time carer, and this meant that Singlehurst rarely left the house and ended up feeling very isolated. She was bored and lonely. The easy access to risky behaviors that the internet provides was one thing, but in combination with the way that PayPal doesn't regulate anything, and with e-wallets and credit cards that allows one to take a loan out very quickly and spend the money just as fast, it was really a recipe for disaster. As a way of escaping the tough reality she was now living, Singlehurst turned to internet games for comfort, just as she had done as a child with her game consoles when she was feeling overwhelmed. It had all started harmlessly enough, just a few games to take the edge off and calm her nerves. It was much more convenient playing online than in person, and then she added a few scratch cards into the mix. What harm could it do? Bingo was her game of choice, especially as they offered decent bonuses. But before long, and without her even noticing, Singlehurst was gambling at every chance she could. While the bingo adverts seen on TV or online emanate a fun, happy, social environment, just a group of carefree, happy-go-lucky ladies going out and playing bingo, the reality of online gambling is far more depressing and a whole lot more isolating. Whenever she found some spare time in between taking care of her elderly mother and looking after her daughter, she was back online. She was officially hooked, and every night she would stay up until 2 or 3 in the morning getting her fix. The next morning, she'd wake up with brain fog, trying to remember how much she had gambled away the night before. Did she empty her bank account again? She'd have to log in to check the state of affairs, and when she did, well, she'd just automatically pick up where she left off. Later, Singlehurst would recall thinking she'd only opened accounts with 2 companies, but the reality was far more concerning. She discovered she had, in fact, signed up with 9. And the majority of them had given her VIP status, offering special perks, free gifts, even encouraging her to gamble more by giving her hundreds of extra dollars as a thank you when she had a win. Messages would pop up regularly, giving her free money to gamble with. Once she had totally wiped out her and her partner's bank account, she secretly took out a loan and borrowed thousands from friends under the pretense that it was for tax bills. Gambling was her way of disassociating, one of her many escapes from trauma and hurt. In 2015, she went on vacation to Gran Canaria, and there she was assaulted. This, unsurprisingly, made things a whole lot worse. When she got home, she continued trying to look after her family, cope with her narcissistic adoptive mother who was suffering with dementia, and start the process of moving permanently to the larger rented property and selling their old home. Singlehurst was the one in charge of dealing with a realtor and attorney, as her partner Chris didn't consider himself as technically minded, instead trusting Singlehurst to take the reins as he always trusted her to look after their finances. In 2016, very soon after it was put on the market, the house did indeed sell, and it sold for £440,000. But Singlehurst decided to keep the news quiet from her family, and when the sale finally went through, she continued to lie and say they hadn't found a buyer, pocketing the money, and then, well, you can probably guess what happened next. Over the next 5 months, she gambled away every single penny. And it didn't help that her mother died during this time. What with that and her addiction, her mind was in a complete fog. Meanwhile, she was getting her family further and further into debt. Looking back, she can't even remember her thought process at the time. She only remembers feeling panicked and ashamed for lying. According to Singlehurst, these online games are just a product designed to suck you in and mess with your brain. And with that, she's probably right on the money. Chris was none the wiser. He and Singlehurst had been together for 30 years, so he had no reason not to trust her. And then the truth came out. Chris only found out that their old house had even sold because some of the friends who passed by had spotted people living in it. Of course, this meant the jig was up, and Singlehurst had no way out. She had to confess. Chris felt so betrayed. Then his betrayal turned to rage. He couldn't understand what had possessed her to do such a thing, and for such a long time. And not owning a computer himself, he had no idea that gambling online was even a thing. He was so livid that he scooped up his daughter and left, telling Singlehurst he would never be coming back, before proceeding to have a total breakdown and started drinking heavily. His life was falling apart. Christmas quickly rolled around, and Singlehurst was alone and at rock bottom, with only alcohol for comfort. In January 2017, she could no longer bear it, and she took an overdose of pills. Damaging her liver with the overdose, along with the damage from alcohol, she developed hepatitis and was taken to hospital. Luckily, she survived, but incredibly, her gambling didn't stop there. Even from her hospital bed after coming so close to death, she was still managing to gamble. But she was in for a rude awakening when she was given the news that she only had a 1 in 3 chance of survival. Not only was she almost homeless, but she was practically on her deathbed. She spent 3 weeks in hospital, and during that time, Chris and her daughter would visit her. The numbness that Singlehurst had been feeling during the peak of her addiction started to diminish, and she recalls that slowly she started to feel things again. Singlehurst sees her time in hospital as a godsend. It could have saved her from further ruin, destitution, and misery. Over time, Chris began to forgive Singlehurst, and when she was discharged from hospital, he didn't hesitate to move back in with her. He still loved her, and considering that they had a child together, he didn't think it was worth splitting the family over a house. Of course, it took him a while to get over what had happened, but now all is totally forgiven. Although they've made amends, Singlehurst explains that gambling totally changes the dynamics of every relationship in your life. While their relationship is back on track, there are still severe repercussions that will affect their future for a long time to come. Sadly, Singlehurst lost her job as a financial advisor, and unless she lands some miracle job that allows her to save enough money, it's extremely unlikely they'll ever be able to buy a property again, as the couple won't be able to get another mortgage. Singlehurst said it was like she had her eyes shut the whole time. She says that a lot of the incentives from these online betting companies were geared towards men, but she'd still take up the offers of free tickets to sports events, shopping vouchers, and, of course, gambling coupons. Shockingly, only one of the companies ever did an affordability check on Singlehurst, but only after she had already spent £440,000. Unquestionably, it came far too late. She revealed that out of the 9 online betting companies she had signed up with, just one offered her what's called self-exclusion, in which the user reports themselves as a problem gambler, and their account must be closed down and all money returned. Singlehurst doesn't believe that this form of self-policing is likely to work when you're in the grip of a gambling addiction. She says, "The problem is, a lot of the time you feel partially shut down, so you can't think straight." She thinks that the reasons for gambling can vary between genders, being quite different for women. On the bright side, the UK government are reviewing gambling laws, have brought in new restrictions to make casino games safer, including advertising restrictions, and reverse withdrawals have now been banned, which allowed players the chance to change their mind and gamble with money they had previously saved. Despite these new measures, there's still more that can be done. Adverts have absolutely saturated TV. It's awful that you cannot escape it, Michelle says. She'd like to see advertising totally banned, or at least restricted to after 10 p.m. MP Carolyn Harris, who chairs the Gambling-Related Harm All-Party Parliamentary Group, has said, "Until we have parity on stakes both online and on land at £2, the industry will continue to profit from the damage addiction causes. Let's hope that happens sooner rather than later." Alright, that brings us to the end of today's episode on Michelle Singlehurst. If you haven't done so already, why not check out some of our other Gambling Gone Wrong videos over on our main channel, and we'll see you there.